Welcome to Unscripted with Russo. For our podcast, we decided to explore the people behind the narratives. I'll introduce decision makers and influencers and find out the intimate story behind their rise to success. Welcome to another episode of Season 4 of Unscripted. I'm Ashley Russo, and I'm being joined today by Chad Butters, the founder and CEO of Eight Oaks Farm Distillery, one of the best places to go in the Lehigh Valley. Chad, thanks for being with us.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure always. Yeah, for sure.
So Chad, people locally know you now because of Eight Oaks, but you have had a long, amazing journey to get to that point. I want to talk to you a little bit about that today so people can get to know you and kind of what it took for you to get to this point, lessons learned, et cetera. So I want to start with, where did you grow up and what kind of kid were you? Tell me a little bit about little Chad.
Yeah. My pleasure. My wife is going to be rolling her eyes because, anytime I get a chance to talk about myself, I'm happy to do it. Right? But no, I grew up, we kind of moved everywhere. My dad worked construction. He built power plants, and power plants take about 2 years to build. And so I consider myself fortunate in that I got to move a little bit of every place in the nation. So we saw everywhere from Maine to California, and got to get exposed to a whole lot of different cultures and a whole lot of different places. So growing up and changing schools every couple of years, I like to say that I don't have deep roots, but I have very wide ones. So just about anywhere I go in the US today, we live somewhere around there, and there's a phone call I can make to touch base with anybody that I might, have parted ways with in the past. So it was a good way to grow up, I think.
I think that's an amazing view on it, because a lot of people would say it's really challenging to move. It's hard to make new friends. And yet you look at the adult perspective, and that idea you've got people everywhere is pretty neat.
Yeah, it is. And it just having that perspective of, seeing different people in different places, going through different challenges, gives you a little bit of perspective on what's difficult and what's not, right? So I don't know, I really consider myself fortunate that that's the childhood that I got to grow up in, and yeah, it gave me a little bit of I like to keep a sense of adventure, kind of spontaneity, and kind of be able to move
You
around.
certainly keep moving, I know that much. So with a dad in construction, are you handy? Did you learn stuff? Did you do small odd jobs with him, or are you someone who we shouldn't hand a hammer to?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm the one that is handy enough just to be dangerous, right? So coming into this call, I'm coming off of being an HVAC repairman over at the distillery just a few minutes ago, and we'll see how my work holds up. I don't put a whole lot of warranty into it, that's for sure. So yeah, handy enough, but just enough to be dangerous, probably.
What kind of student were you? Were you into school? Were you into sports? Did you play any instruments?
Yeah, I was a terrible student growing up. I really enjoyed meeting people and learning things, but only things that I was interested in. So academically, I think all the way through high school, there was nothing particularly for my parents to be proud of on report cards, but made it through it. And I was the guy that, instead of the good grades, I was trying to find a way to get out earlier. And so we lived in California at the time, and I went to my guidance counselor my senior year, and I said, how can I graduate sooner? And they said, well, there's no way for you to graduate sooner. This is the program. And I said, there's no way in the world to graduate sooner. And they said, well, if you go over to this alternative high school over here, where kind of some of the difficult children have to go, then maybe you can work out a program where they graduate you sooner. So that's what I did, and I went over there, and we came up with a program that got me out of there in October. So I just couldn't get out of school soon enough. But as an adult, as I got to be older and went to college, I really enjoyed college. And it's funny how I think a lot of people will be able to relate to this. They probably did marginally okay in high school because they weren't interested. But when you get into college and university and you're taking courses that you're interested in, it's amazing how well you can do, right? So I did really well in a professional aeronautics bachelor, and then a master's of business from Drexel. But I really, really enjoyed learning what I was
And it's
learning.
funny,
I
your
think that's
parents might not have predicted, in ninth grade that that was the direction you were going to go. But
no.
I've got two kids kind of getting ready to launch, and we keep saying at home, college is going to open up a whole new way. It's more about learning to think, be a critical thinker, be a problem solver, learn who you are and where you fit in the world. And I think school, those first 12 years is so prescribed.
Sure.
And it just isn't that appealing to everybody. And you have to find your thing. So one of your things was aeronautics. How did you know that that's what you wanted to go into? Were you always someone drawn to a plane?
Yeah, just fascination as a kid, right? So, I think probably it's fairly common that, as a 6 or 7 year old, I think I remember going on my first commercial flight and just being enamored by the whole thing. And back then, this would have been in the 70s, and flying was a big deal, and you got dressed up to do it. And, going on those flights was just such a sense of adventure. I graduate from high school, I joined the service, and I didn't have college, so I couldn't go right in and be a pilot. So I went into an aircraft mechanic, and then took a few years as an aircraft mechanic, and then applied to the warrant officer school for the Army to be a helicopter pilot, and pursued it that way. So that was my in for aviation. Yeah.
What an amazing path. And what were those first years like when you had finished high school, but you really, couldn't go into the officer training yet? You didn't have, and you were working as a mechanic. Tell us about those early years. And were there lessons that you can look back on now and say, wow, I'm really glad I had that experience?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. So just from the military perspective, and anyone that's military will appreciate this. But as an enlisted person in the military, your tasks are, let's just say, slightly different than maybe an officer in the military. So there's a lot of hard manual labor that goes into the enlisted ranks a lot of times, and a lot of demand is placed on you. And to go through that for 4 or 5 years before taking the next step into the officer corps, just built a fundamental work ethic, and you're able to relate to the people that are continuing to have to work in that particular field, and go through those particular tasks. So it just builds a sense of empathy, right? That you can relate to what other people are having to do. So, I've poured concrete and dug ditches, and it just makes me have a sense of value for people that do all sorts of work, because I know how hard it is, right? So yeah, I wouldn't trade any of that for the experience, for sure.
Now, how about your time in the Army? Tell me a little bit about that. And did you move around, and what did you see and do that eventually not only did you get further education, but
Mhm.
really from that, like you mentioned, life experience? I think any of us that are employers, when we look at resumes, you see military, it's just a whole other category. It's just an amazing thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, this could easily become a commercial for the Army, because I have nothing but good things to say about that particular time. My journey started in the enlisted world, and then went into flight school. And then from helicopters went into fixed wing aviation, and from regular Army into special operations aviation. So I got to do a little bit of everything. And the things, I think, we talk a lot in business about skill sets that transfer and skill sets that maybe don't, right? So, in the Army, the sense of camaraderie, building a team, being part of a team, knowing when to follow and when to lead, those are all really critical pieces, right? And then you start going into combat type of an operation in Afghanistan, things like that. And you start to really develop a sense for what's important and what's not. And what's worth getting concerned about and what's not, right? So a lot of, I think, things that we do as leaders within our companies, or within our departments or whatever, so much of what we do is making sure that we're leading with empathy, and with a sense of trust and authenticity, and having a steady hand on the wheel, right? And not overreacting to things that could be dramatic, but if you're solution oriented and kind of keeping keeping your eyes on the horizon, it's not as dramatic as it might seem. And I think you build up some resilience, having gone through really difficult times, because it's all relative, right? I mean, somebody that never saw anything difficult in their life, this pandemic was very difficult for everyone. But someone that's seen some really life and death threatening type of things, even people that, maybe are cancer survivors, that's a good category. Those are people that, hey, I know what hard is. This is difficult, but it's possible, it's doable, and with resilience and with determination and grit, you'll get there, right?
Yeah, that perspective is absolutely everything. And I just finished reading the book Grit, actually, you mentioned.
Oh yeah,
Such
good.
a good book. And I do not have that experience. However, I'm married to a physician who is on kind of the front lines in the cancer journey every day.
Yeah,
And I have to say the benefit to my life and our family's life in his perspective that he brings to our family has been absolutely incredible, really. I'm so grateful for it, because I don't know that I would have that otherwise. And that perspective that you get does help you take a breath and say, okay, where does this fall
yeah, yeah.
on the spectrum of things? All right, well, we're going to take a quick break, Chad, but when we get back, I want to talk a little bit about how your career progressed, and then how you switched into what you're doing now with Eight Oaks, and tell us more about that brand. So stay tuned, everybody. You're listening to Unscripted with Russo.
Any time of year, the Lehigh Valley is an exceptional place for food, drink, and entertainment. Whether you're cooling off from the summer heat at Dutch Springs or shopping for just the right kind of gift at Chris Kindle Market, you will make memories all year round. For more information on what the Lehigh Valley has to offer, check out Discover Lehigh Valley's website at discoverlehighvalley.com.
Welcome back to Unscripted with Russo. Everybody, I'm Ashley Russo, and I am here with a good friend of ours, Chad Butters, Eight Oaks. They are so awesome. Oh my gosh, if you have not been to their distillery, you are missing out. Tell me a little bit about this idea of getting more education. You talked about not being a great student, but then finding sort of your intellectual voice and mind through the military and through the opportunity to get an education. And you ended up going on and getting your master's degree in business. What was that decision all about?
Sure. Well, I think, I definitely credit the Army with providing opportunity to get training. A lot of what we do in the Army is, some academic training, whether it's technical training or whether it's leadership training or anywhere in between. There's lots and lots of training that goes on in the Army. And I think you build a level of confidence as you complete the training, right? As you go to the next level and the next level and the next level, you start to realize that, hey, I can do this. I actually can pay attention and I can learn. And not only can I, but I actually enjoy it when I'm doing it and when I'm involved and engaged. So I think that set the conditions for wanting to pursue other things. And I was just interested in professional aeronautics, for instance. I was very interested in that as a field, so there's lots to study there. And then as I got a little bit older, I really wanted to understand how to be a little bit more efficient in business, whether that was efficiency through learning the language of finance or efficiency in learning and understanding processes and procedures and operations. And I think the academic foundation is very helpful in that. And having that structure for me is super helpful too, because now, as you know, we can go on the Google machine and we can learn lots of things at a superficial kind of level, but understanding how to build on that knowledge and get a little deeper knowledge, and then understand that, okay, now I've learned this, the next module is this. So that structure is very helpful. But I think truly, as I look back at, being like a high school student, I think most of, what held me back was just the not knowing that you could be a good student, just not having not achieved anything in that regard. You kind of just, you look at other people and you say, okay, they're the smart ones and I'm
Yeah,
not.
it's such a small box, I think, that you're supposed to fit within.
Yeah.
And if you don't fit within it, or you don't get a taste of success within that box, it's pretty hard to imagine yourself succeeding in that realm. And then the world opens up to you, whether that's through college, the military, a career, and starts to show you, I hope that's the goal anyway, right? That you have strengths and you have ways
Yeah.
of learning that maybe aren't in that tiny box we're shown as kids. So I think
Yeah,
that's
I
pretty
think
interesting.
I really enjoy a book by Malcolm Gladwell called Tipping Point. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to
I have.
read that, but I love that book because it talks about, some of the things, as children are successful academically, of course, more is invested in them to be more successful and more. So it kind of builds on itself, but what it doesn't really address is what happens to the people that are not, right? So, I think that's a whole different podcast, but I think there's a lot of work that we can do in how we educate our children and how we value creativity just as much as we do science.
Well,
And
if it gives you any hope, because my kids sort of fall in between, I think your kids and grandkids age, right?
okay, yeah,
I've seen a really major shift happen
that's great.
in the last 4 or 5 years. And I think the pandemic has absolutely kind of ripped that Band-Aid off and said, we have to think and educate differently. And
Sure.
I saw my kids have so many opportunities to be creative
Sure.
through the pandemic, and in a way that would not necessarily have happened in traditional schooling. So I'm kind of excited and encouraged that this is like another positive potential fallout of all of this, is to see that happening. So
Yeah.
tell me about the shift. How did you end up in the Lehigh Valley? I mean, you talked about moving around as a kid, and how'd you end up
Yeah.
here?
Yeah, I actually was still active duty Army at the time. I had some pretty unique assignments towards the end of my career. The one previous to this move was down in what we call Military District of Washington, DC, Baltimore area. And then I was able to essentially pick a spot for my family to live, as I did a lot of deployments in these days. This is still in the heat of Afghanistan and Iraq. And with the job that I was doing, I was given a little bit of flexibility on where we lived. So my family and I, at that time, we were living down near Baltimore, and we just went on a little weekend cruise up north, and we ended up somewhere south of here, Lancaster, that whole area. And to just make the long story short, we ended up driving up this way. And I remember we were on Interstate 78, and we took Route 100 north, just totally serendipitous, hey, let's take this exit. And we cruised up maybe 4 miles, and all of a sudden the hills started rolling, and I saw a sign for Appalachian Trail, and I saw a sign for trout fishing, and it was just beautiful, beautiful topography. And we really just fell in love with the place, and we started just driving around, and lo and behold, there was a beautiful house that was for sale. And we called our realtor, and I think we put an offer in that day, and within just a couple of weeks we were here. So we've been hooked since 2007.
Wow, what an incredible story, and what a good luck for us in the Lehigh Valley that you kind of took that turn off of 78 that day. I love that. And how has your family found it? I mean, just being in the Lehigh Valley.
Oh, we love it. We most of our time we've spent in the Southeast, Texas and North Carolina and Alabama. So this is a totally different change of climate for us. And we love the 4 seasons. Although winter gets a little bit long, it's easy to hop on a plane and go south for a little bit to get a little vitamin D before you head back to winter and brave out through March. But we love that. And I tell you, I'm a huge advocate for the Lehigh Valley, just because you have, in Allentown, Bethlehem, and Easton, you have 3 totally separate personalities within those. All of them have their own unique benefits. And then this band that surrounds Allentown, Bethlehem, and Easton of just exceptional farmland that I've never seen in any of the places that we've ever lived. I've never seen these small family farms that are still doing their own farm stands. I'm thinking about things like Beth and Dave at Bad Farms with dairy, and Rainbow Farms and Red Cat Farms and Crooked Row Farms. I mean, there's just, I could probably easily name 20 that do anything from beef to dairy to eggs and poultry to vegetables. and it's all right here in Lehigh Valley, and it's totally grown and supported by your neighbors. So it's super easy to go out and find really unbelievable produce and that type of stuff around here, which is incredibly unique. And I think maybe we lose sight of that because it's right here all the time, right?
Yeah, you almost take it for granted, realizing I know that my sort of spring, summer, and fall food routine is that I've got local purveyors for my meats, and I keep those frozen, and I go to the farm stand every weekend, and that's what I get. And those are the fruits, vegetables, and protein we have for the week here, and it's pretty amazing that you can do that. So what was it that kind of precipitated the decision for you to jump into that market by having, opening Eight Oaks Farm and Distillery? It's a big undertaking, and I'm not totally sure everyone, myself included, realizes the unbelievable chemistry, manufacturing, a whole other skill set that goes into doing something like this. I mean, we see sort of the fun part, like what's the mixed drink of the week?
Sure. Yeah.
That's really awesome, Chad. I love it. But what behind the machine behind something like this is so big. How did you decide to leap in and open a distillery?
Yeah, well, I appreciate the question, and I'll try to be as brief as I can in answering it. This one is a detailed story, but I'll try to be brief with it. Really, the catalyst was my wife. My wife, this was 2012. She was diagnosed with colon cancer at the age of 49. And it was a huge wake-up call to us. It was not just a trivial, stage 1 type of thing. This was a stage 3+. So there were surgeries and radiation and chemo, and then there were complications for those things that ended up in emergency rooms and intensive care, and very dramatic things, life and death type things. But it gave us an opportunity as she was recovering throughout those months to have a lot of conversation. And again, I was active duty Army at the time. The Army is gracious about giving as much time as you need to take care of your family in those types of situations. So I got to spend a lot of time with her. One of the conversations that we had was, this is clearly an alarm bell for us about life being short. What is it that we want to do? So what is it that's going to make us exceptionally happy? That's the list we wanted to create. So number 1 on the list was just simply spend more time with friends and family, which had an immediate kind of indication that I needed to get out of the Army, because those constant deployments keep you away from family for months and years sometimes. We wanted to start a family business because we have 2 adult children, and we thought that would be really fun to do, and maybe they would be interested in taking on. We wanted to work together every day. We wanted to be home together every night, and we wanted to have fun. So our list came down to 5 things. There were no, a year prior to that, if you had me come up with a list, it would have been Harley Davidsons and vacation houses and boats, and none of that made the list, right? The really, really important things made the list. So I'm often asked if we, did my grandfather distill, or was it in the family? No, it wasn't. It just, to make the long story short, as we surveyed the land for what kind of family business could we have that had an agricultural component that would be fun and interesting for us, what we landed on was growing grains and turning grains into whiskey, and then having a kind of a very similar business model as a winery, right? So having tours and tastings and all of that. So we were never passionate about distilling. We were passionate about that list, and distilling checks all the blocks off of the list for us. So that's kind of how we got started in that.
And Chad, it's so incredibly powerful, because I think the why behind a business is really the most critical piece. And of course, we both talk all the time about how many the books we both read, and we're, the leadership and business development and empathy and trying to better ourselves. And really, pretty much every one of them mentions at some point that why. And your why was so strong and is still so strong. And it's so apparent through your brand. I think that our Valley is so lucky to have you and your family here with such a strong why, because you can feel it throughout everything you do in our community. I want to ask you about the name. So You've got a really cool symbol. It's 8 oaks, but if you look at it closely, it's really an infinity symbol, which is it's close to the number 8. What is the significance of the name and the logo?
Yeah. So the significance of the name is my grandfather grew up in the 40s, and he traveled a lot for work, much the way I did during my military time. And he would write letters home. So there wasn't a lot of phone calls or certainly there was no cell phones or any of that, right? So long distance was a big price to pay. So you'd write a lot of letters. He would write those letters home to his wife, my grandmother, and his son, my dad. And at the end of the letters, he would sign off with the number 8. And to him, the number 8 was representative of the 8 letters in I love you. So that's how he communicated that emotion to his family. My dad did exactly the same thing with me and my mother. I was an only child, so it was just the 3 of us moving around all over. And he did exactly the same thing. But now instead of just letters, it might have been birthday cards, or it might have been sticky notes on a refrigerator or whatever. You just knew if you saw that number 8 that somebody was thinking about you, and they were just leaving that thought, right? So we did exactly the same thing with my family. I have 2 kids and my wife, and spent a lot of time away from each other, unfortunately. But as we did, you can get a text that just says 8, and it says everything you need to say. So that 8 is a very important piece of what we do. And then
just the fact that you're sharing that and now have chosen to share that with our community, to know that there's that love, that you're really, your love of your family, each other, your love of the business you've started, and really the love of your community. I just, that's amazing, Chad, seriously.
Well, thanks.
It really is.
What's really cool, Ashley, is that we get people that have gotten married or done different things, and they incorporate that into their vows, and they incorporate it into, like, somebody used a number 8 for a sign-in thing for their wedding. I love when people use it. It's just so cool to see people kind of grab onto that. So that's neat. And then the oak, because the oak tree to me is symbolic of nature and longevity and strength, and everything that we age as far as whiskey, like bourbon and rye whiskey, everything is aged in oak. So the oak tree plays a really important role in our production, actually, too.
What about those early days? So you make this decision, you've got the why, you guys are clearly, you're comfortable risk-taking, moving quickly, figuring it out. What were the first lessons learned early on? What were some of the challenges you faced, and how'd you overcome those?
Yeah, I think the first one, and any other entrepreneur will, I think, probably attest to this too. One of the first ones for me, and it may be based on a little bit of ignorance going in, I always thought of the entrepreneur as this person that was kind of out there, them against the world, right? And you're creating a vision, and you're making it happen. And what I realized very quickly is how many people it takes to get your vision into place, right? I mean, whether you want to start with the banker, that takes a chance on a loan, or an investor, a friend, a family, a friend. As when you first develop these ideas, they're just ideas. They're just in your head. And so as you start to have the courage to actually talk about them and say, okay, this is what I'm thinking, you need some support people that will help, like, hey, that's really good, like, encourage you.
Even just the people who listen early on.
Absolutely, just the people who listen. The plumbers, the construction people, the concrete pouring people, the compliance people, the PLCB here in Pennsylvania, that we have regulations that we have to comply with. There are people that go through the process of approving that. And it takes a relationship to do that. It's not just easy, right? So, I mean, if you sit down and you think of all the people that influence you getting your business up and running and sustaining itself and going in the direction that you had before you even wrote that first PowerPoint, it's hundreds of people. So I would think that's probably the very first lesson, is like, you're not doing this on your own.
It's impossible. You really can't go at it alone. And I did an interview recently for the Peak TV for a physician piece, and he talked about the amount of people that sort of touch your life through a medical process, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it almost becomes countless. And
Right.
it's really similar in business. It is similar. And I don't know that we frame it that way so that often. So I think that that's great that you called that out, and it's so important and such an early lesson you have to learn. And the more you learn it, the easier it gets to ask for the help, right? Because then you start to say,
Absolutely.
hey, you know what? This is not my strength, but I know it's somebody. So whose
Yeah,
strength is it, and how can they work with us to figure it out? So it's pretty cool.
absolutely. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about Eight Oaks and what your goals are, what you guys do for the community. And then, of course, I want to touch on the amazing pivot you made early on in the pandemic. It was national news, CNN. You guys made hand sanitizer. So first, just tell me a little bit about the business and what you do. And then let's talk about that pivotal moment back in March and April
Sure.
2020.
Sure. So the purpose of our business is at the heart of everything we do. It's our commitment to make our community a better place. That I think it's super important. You hit on the why, why do we start the business? But what is the purpose of your business? What are you doing? I think that's critically important to figure out as early as possible, because everything, that's our compass. Every decision that we come to, that's what we look at. We look down and we say, okay, does this fulfill our purpose or not? Or does this fulfill our purpose more than this other option? So that's what literally guides us to make decisions within our company is meeting that purpose. And a big part of that, of course, is the team that we have. So, we want to make sure we have a positive impact on our crew, our employees, the people that help us on a daily basis. We want to make sure that we have a positive impact within our community by providing very local grains. So everything's exceptionally locally grown, right? It's right here within 8 miles of the distillery. Every piece of grain is grown that goes into our products. So that's really kind of what the business is about. We want to take these locally grown products. We want to be the confluence between history and science and agriculture. And where those things meet, that's where we live. And what we want is we want our little distillery to be the center point of that pebble that has an impact on your community, and then it ripples out from there in any way that we can. So, those are the things that kind of guide our day-to-day decisions.
And that focus on community and giving back has been so critical for you guys as a family and as an organization. And the pandemic was no exception. So how did you convert your distillery into a place to make hand sanitizer? And you guys did it so quickly on such a mass scale. Briefly take me through that thought process, Chad, where everyone else is trying to figure out how they're going to buy toilet paper. So,
I credit that, to having been in really difficult places before. And so when we saw this pandemic coming, we knew it wasn't the end of the world. We knew there was, the question is, how do we fulfill our purpose in this environment, right? So this is the hand we've been dealt as a community, as a nation, as a world. How does our purpose guide us through that? I was laying in bed one Saturday morning around the middle of March, and I was scrolling my news feed, and I saw a news feed an article about some people that were buying up all the sanitizer and putting it in their garage and then putting it on Amazon for literally like $300 for a small 4-ounce bottle, right? And so then I went to Amazon and I saw, I was like, I don't believe it. So I went to Amazon and I saw it, and I saw for myself. I even took a screenshot. It was $380 for a little small bottle of hand sanitizer.
wow.
And I just thought, that is absolutely ridiculous. So I Googled hand sanitizer, and the active ingredient in hand sanitizer, the majority ingredient is alcohol. And we happen to be able to do that, to make that. And so, not only do we have the skill set and the people and the equipment to do it, but we also have the license to do it. So, if we can make alcohol, then how hard is it to put a few other pieces of ingredient in? So we went to the World Health Organization's website. They had a kind of a make your own hand sanitizer, formula. And we said, let's implement that. The very next day was Sunday. We had an emergency board meeting with all of the board members on the telephone. I said, hey, this is what I think we ought to do here. Let's shut down operations completely. I believe this was Friday the 13th, was March 13th. And that's just when things were there was a hint of things starting to close. So we hadn't been told to close or anything, but it was obvious that what we needed to do was let's shut down operations, let's turn into hand sanitizer. And we thought we were going to turn it in and do, we expected to do 4,000 bottles. That's kind of what our intention was. And then what we ended up doing based on the demand, once we put the Facebook post out there, it really did go viral. As much as I hate to use that overused term, it truly did just take off. And it just so happened that the chief brand officer, his name is Josh, he lives in Wisconsin, but he was out here visiting for an on-site event. He was staying at my house and he posted it, and I was hearing his phone just absolutely explode. The next morning, we got phone calls from CNN and a lot of other places that started. CNN came in on Tuesday and spent the entire day with us and did a whole story on what we were doing. And then the phone started ringing, and we had 3 full-time people answering the phone. And we had no idea what the demand would be on this, just no idea. And within 2 days, our staff was coming to us and saying, the people that were answering the phone, they were saying, hey, we need a little help because this is emotionally taxing. Because everyone that they talked to,
Had a
it was
story.
in their mind, it was life and death that they got this hand sanitizer. So now we were stuck in the position of having to determine who gets it and who doesn't, which is not a great place to be. So we ended up over the course of just a few days, talking to all emergency management directors in 7 counties around us. And we said, we want to push it out to you, and then you guys determine who gets it. Because we need to make sure. We were getting phone calls literally from hospitals that had COVID wards that didn't have hand sanitizer. It was just unbelievable. The Department of Defense, Customs and Border Patrol, prisons, morgues, just you name it. So that model ended up working really well with pushing it out to emergency management directors and letting them distribute it.
Such an amazing service, amazing pivot. And really then that decision to just say, you're the professionals, get it in the hands of the people who need it. I think that that's just so brilliant. We're going to take a quick break, Chad. When we come back, I want to talk to you a little bit more about all the things Lehigh Valley that you and your family love. So stay tuned, everybody. You're listening to Unscripted.
Time to take your workout outdoors. Discover Lehigh Valley is a great resource for finding easily accessible nature trails with stunning views and challenging terrain. Whether you're exploring the Delaware and Lehigh Trail or going for a jog on the Ironton Rail Trail, explore Discover Lehigh Valley to get you started. Follow them on Instagram, Lehigh Valley, PA.
Welcome back to Unscripted with Russo. I'm Ashley Russo, and I'm here with Chad Butters from Eight Oaks Farm Distillery. Chad, thank you so much for joining us. Your story is incredible. What you've done for this community is incredible. And I don't know what part I like the most, but I really love the idea that your family decided they wanted to go somewhere to live and be together. And you somehow, by a miracle, ended up right here in the Lehigh Valley, went up Route 100, and have built this amazing family business from all of that. So I'd love to know a little bit more about what you guys love about the Lehigh Valley. You've been here now about 14 years?
Yeah.
Right, so tell me, what do you love about the Lehigh Valley? And I know you've got your children are nearby, and now you've got grandchildren, and so what do you guys love about it here?
Yeah, well, certainly, you hit it right on the head. Lately, as of the last 2 years, our granddaughter just turned 2 last week. So the fact that I get to see her pretty much every day is something that I wouldn't change for anything, right? So that's what's keeping us here for sure is the granddaughter and the family. But I kind of hit on it just a little bit ago too. The area that we live in, I think it's a bit of a hidden jewel in that a lot of people, when you say Allentown, that aren't necessarily from here, they just have a kind of a vision in their head that they get maybe based on an old Billy Joel song or whatever. And it's not what I think of at all. I mean, I think of Allentown as being, believe it or not, it's one of the best Mexican restaurants in the world in Allentown. That's a whole separate thing. But
I was going to ask you what your favorite place to eat is in the Lehigh Valley, so feel free to share.
oh my goodness, it's this little Mexican restaurant. It's on 7th and Linden, I believe. And I think it's called La Casita, but I would have to make sure of the name. It's just a little corner bodega down there in Allentown. And you would think it's just a little convenience store, but you walk in through the little convenience store part in the back, there's several tables back there. And there is a lovely family that is just putting down. And I used to live in El Paso, Texas. So I've got some street cred on this one. And I will tell you, that's some of the best Mexican food I've ever had. It's absolutely delicious. So anyway, Allentown, of course, has the arena and different things to do down in Allentown. Bethlehem, you get twice the fun because you get north of Bethlehem with history and Moravian College and all of the north downtown area. And the south side, you've got Steel Stacks and Arts Quest and all the things that are going on down there now. So that's fantastic. And then Easton, I'm a big foodie, and Easton is, I don't know that a whole lot of people know it, but Easton's the place for good food. So there's lots of great places to eat in Easton. And Easton to me is just a very diverse, almost like a miniature New York City in Easton. So I love the fact that each one of those cities has their very own personality. And I really enjoy the fact that around those cities, it's surrounded by, some of the best farmland that's out there. And growing, anything that you need it can be produced here and is with these local family farms. So getting to know these local family farms, whether you go to Easton Farmers Market or any of the other farmers markets, but go visit the actual farm, they'll be glad to show you around. And it's amazing what's going on in our local community as far as that's concerned. And then just to add the cherry on top, you've got the Appalachian Trail running right through here. So just so much to see and do and be part of. So yeah, it's home for us. And the Four Seasons makes it where by the time you're tired of summer, you've got a fall coming in, and by the time you're tired of that, you get to have winter, whether or not you like it. So we can't ask for a better place. And the community has been exceptionally welcoming to not only our family, but to our business. So yeah.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. And I'm here 16 years and I'm a transplant, but I consider the Lehigh Valley home. And certainly I think I've raised my kids here and now you're watching your granddaughter grow up here. That certainly changes your whole perspective on the way you appreciate the area that you're in. We're so fortunate in this Lehigh Valley. So thank you for sharing all of that with us, Chad. Before I let you go, I do want to ask you our rapid fire questions. I just want to confirm you have not heard them, but you're ready to go.
I have not heard them, and now I'm nervous.
Okay. What is your favorite hobby?
Favorite hobby is probably hiking.
What's one food you could not live without?
Any Mexican food.
What actor would you cast to play you in a movie about your life?
Oh my goodness. I'm trying to think of what my wife would say to this one because she's mentioned things before. I think probably the guy who plays on American Dad. There's a sitcom that's on American Dad, and she just thinks he's goofy and silly and would probably cast him. Yeah.
So somebody goofy and silly. I don't know. I was thinking Chip Gaines.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
So I don't know that counts.
Not nearly handy enough for that, for sure. Yeah.
But fun with kids and outdoors. And I just
sure.
see that there's an energy.
Yeah.
All
sure.
right. If you didn't have the job you have now and not listing a job you've already had, what would you be doing instead? What's a job you'd like to have?
Man, this sounds really lofty, but right now I really love neuroscience. I just really, the brain is so interesting to me, and how we, how it works and how we get along together as different people. And it's just incredibly interesting to me. I could never understand or really, get to that level, but I really enjoy that topic a lot.
Well, if there's anyone that I think could tackle becoming a neuroscientist later in life, it would be you.
It's going to be much later in life. I can assure you that.
You got
Yeah.
your hands full
Yeah.
with HVAC repairs.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, exactly. All right. And the last question is, name a person who inspires you.
Oh, goodness. There's so many. I mean, there's so many people that flood into your mind. I go back to, things like JFK and things of that nature. It really does tend to be service-oriented people. I really, really appreciate people that, put the good of the community in front of themselves. So, if you wanted to go to MLK, or, any one of these people that are really just all about making positive change in their environment.
Well, I think that's a great way to end it, Chad, because you are certainly someone who is making positive change in our community and our environment. And we're so grateful to have you on the show with us today and sharing your story with everybody out there. So thank you for joining us.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having us. And we're so grateful to be in the Lehigh Valley. Thanks.
All right, everybody, you've been listening to Unscripted with Russo. Until next time, and don't forget, please check out Eight Oaks Farm Distillery. You will not regret it. Have a good one.